So we learned about SQL and NoSQL. Let's now compare them. And let's start with horizontal and vertical scaling. Because as I mentioned at the end of the last lecture, we often need to scale our database to keep up with our growing application with more and more users. Horizontal and vertical scaling are the two approaches we can use to scale our database. Now, what do they mean? Well, in horizontal scaling, we simply add more servers. And the advantage here, of course, is that we can do this infinitely. We can always buy new servers, be that on a cloud provider or in our own data center, and connect them to our database and split our data across all these servers. Of course, this means that we also need some process that runs queries on all of them and merges them together intelligently. So this is generally something which is not that easy to do, but this is of course a good way of scaling. Vertical scaling simply means that we make our existing server stronger by adding more CPU or memory or something like that. Especially with cloud providers, this is typically very easy. You simply choose another option from the drop-down, you pay more, and you're done. The problem here is that you have some limit. You can't fit infinitely much CPU power into a single machine. So these are the two ways we can scale. Now let's compare SQL and NoSQL regarding that and in general. Now in general, in SQL, we use schemas. We also have relations. These are two core characteristics. And data is typically distributed across many tables, which are then connected through relations. Now, regarding the scaling, it's important that horizontal scaling often is very difficult or even impossible due to the way SQL works. You can, of course, add more servers, but running them all on one shared data cloud, so to say, one shared database, is pretty difficult. Vertical scaling is easily possible. You can simply make your server stronger, but adding more servers can be very hard or even impossible, so definitely not trivial. So this is a problem possibly if we have multiple or thousands of read and write queries per second, then maybe our SQL database, especially if we do very complex joins between related tables, can reach limits or cannot be the best choice. NoSQL is schemaless and has only a few relations, if at all. The data is typically not distributed across multiple collections, but instead we work with merged or nested documents in an existing document, though we, of course, also have a couple of collections for the different features of our application typically. With NoSQL, horizontal scaling is easier. Still something where you have to know what you do, but there are cloud providers which do that for us, so we don't have to know the ins and outs of that. And in general, due to the way it works, with less connections and so on, this is possible. And therefore, we also get great performance for mass read and write requests, and NoSQL can be very performant in an application with high throughput. Now, this makes SQL look very bad, but the full truth is that it always depends on the kind of data you're storing. If you are storing where the relations are really important and where you want to have a split up across tables and where you want to have strong schemas, SQL can be perfect. Also, not every part of your data is accessed multiple times per second. You can have parts of your application where you manage general data, let's say user data, which does not change that often, and therefore SQL might be very good there. Other parts of the application, let's say orders or shopping carts that do change frequently, could be stored with NoSQL. And there, the relations might also not be that important because you can always put all the information that belongs to a shopping cart or to an order in one single document. And even if you do, for example, store some user data there, you might not need to touch that document just because the user changed his photo, because you probably didn't store that along with the order anyways. Now, in this course, we will build both. We will use both because I want to teach you both. And it's not so much about this course application, but you should know how to use SQL with NodeJS, because maybe you need that in your application, or you're working on a project where you don't decide which database to use, but you simply have to use it. So we will use SQL first, but then I will also show you how to use NoSQL with MongoDB. So we will basically implement the course project or the current state of the course project with both databases, and you will see how to interact with both of them. And let's start with SQL in this module. Let's install a MySQL database and learn how to interact with it from inside our Node.js code.